My phone rang at exactly 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, 9 years after my family destroyed my life. The caller ID showed a number I had memorized, but never wanted to see again. My mother's voice cracked through the speaker, sobbing words that made my blood run cold. "Randolph, please don't hang up. The truth finally came out about what Emma really did to you. We know everything now. We were so wrong." I stared out my law office window in Denver, watching traffic crawl through downtown streets, and felt absolutely nothing. 9 years of silence, and now she wanted to talk. I ended the call without saying a word. 9 years earlier, I was a completely different person, living a completely different life. At 20 years old, I thought I had the world figured out. I was Randolph Mitchell Harrison Star pre-med student at Ohio State University, with a 3.8 GPA and acceptance letter to Case Western Reserve Medical School already tucked safely in my desk drawer. Life in Columbus, Ohio felt like something out of a movie back then. Our house in Upper Arlington was the kind of place where success lived and breathed. My father, Marcus, owned Harrison Automotive Parts, manufacturing a business he had built from scratch into a $3 million operation that supplied components to Ford and General Motors. Walking through our front door meant stepping into evidence of hard work paying off. Persian rugs covered hardwood floors that gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Family photos lined the mantelpiece, showing years of vacations to places like Yellowstone and the Outer Banks. My mother, Linda, ran Elegant Affairs Catering from our converted garage, turning her passion for cooking into a thriving small business that served the wealthiest families in Central Ohio. She could transform any event into something magical, whether it was a golden anniversary or a graduation party. Her talent for making people feel special had built a client list that kept her booked solid 6 months in advance. I was the golden child, the one who never caused trouble, or stayed out past curfew, or brought home grades that disappointed anyone. While other families dealt with teenage rebellion and parent-child conflicts, I studied late into the night and volunteered at the local free clinic on weekends. My parents bragged about me to their friends, talked about the day I would become Dr. Harrison, and make them even prouder than they already were. My younger sister Emma was different. At 18, she represented everything I was not. Where I was responsible, she was reckless. Where I planned for the future, she lived entirely in the moment. She dated guys with motorcycles, and tattoos, came home smelling like cigarettes, and cheap beer failed classes she could have easily passed if she had bothered to show up. Our parents worried about her constantly, but I always defended her choices. Emma had this way of looking at you with big brown eyes that made you want to protect her from the world. She was small, barely 5 feet, 2 inches tall, with strawberry blonde hair that she wore in loose waves around her shoulders. People always said we looked nothing alike, which was true. Where she was delicate and feminine, I was tall and broad-shouldered like our father. Where she was spontaneous and emotional, I was methodical and calm. But I loved my little sister more than anything. When she struggled with algebra, I spent hours tutoring her at our kitchen table. When she got grounded for missing curfew, I convinced our parents to reduce her punishment. When she cried about boys who broke her heart, I listened without judgment and offered advice she usually ignored, but seemed to appreciate anyway. Looking back now, I can see signs I missed then. The way Emma's smile never quite reached her eyes when our parents praised my achievements. How she would leave the room whenever they talked about my future medical career or the scholarship money they had saved specifically for my education. The small comments she made about how easy everything came to me, how I never had to work for their attention the way she did. Our family dynamic was complicated in ways I did not understand at 20 years old. Marcus came from poverty and valued achievement above everything else. He measured love in terms of success and accomplishment. Linda followed his lead in most things, believing that supporting her husband meant supporting his vision for our family. They both assumed Emma would eventually straighten out and follow a more conventional path. but their patience was wearing thin. My best friend Jake Patterson and I spent most of our free time studying together for the MCAT or playing basketball at the local rec center. Jake was planning to become a police officer rather than pursuing medical school, but we had been inseparable since middle school. He was the brother I never had someone who knew all my secrets and supported all my dreams. My girlfriend Sarah Collins had been part of my life for 2 years by then. She was a nursing student at Ohio State, beautiful and kind, and everything I thought I wanted in a future wife. We talked about getting married after I finished medical school, maybe starting our family in our late 20s when my career was established. Sarah loved spending time with my family, especially Emma, who she treated like the younger sister she had never had. Everything felt perfect that spring. I was weeks away from graduating summa cum laude with my bachelor's degree in biology. Medical school orientation was scheduled for late August. My parents had promised to buy me a new car as a graduation gift, and I had my eye on a silver Honda Accord that would be practical for the next 4 years of school and residency. The future stretched ahead of me, like a golden road with no obstacles or detours in sight. I would become a doctor, marry Sarah, give my parents the grandchildren they already talked about, and live the American dream exactly as it was supposed to unfold. I believed in hard work and good choices and the fundamental fairness of the universe. I had no idea that my sister was about to teach me how quickly a perfect life can turn into a nightmare. Emma came home that night in late April looking like she had been through a battle. Her makeup was smudged, her clothes wrinkled, and torn at the shoulder seam. She stumbled through the front door around 2 a.m, long after our parents had gone to bed. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich after hours of studying for finals when she appeared like a ghost in the doorway. "Emma, what happened? Are you okay?" I dropped my sandwich and moved toward her, concerned by the way she was shaking. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face and whispered, "Something terrible happened at the party tonight. I can't talk about it. I just need someone to understand." I opened my arms without thinking, the way I had done hundreds of times when we were younger and she needed comfort. She collapsed against my chest, sobbing so hard her whole body convulsed. I held her there in our kitchen, stroking her hair and telling her everything would be all right, that whatever happened, we would figure it out together. "Promise me you won't tell Mom and Dad," she whispered against my shirt. "Promise me this stays between us. I just need time to process what happened." I promised, of course. She was my little sister, and she was hurting. I would have promised her anything in that moment to make her pain go away. What I did not know was that this moment of brotherly comfort, this innocent act of love and protection, would become the weapon she used to destroy my entire existence. The 2 weeks that followed that night changed Emma in ways that should have warned me something was deeply wrong. My sister, who had always been dramatic and emotional, became quiet and withdrawn. She avoided eye contact during family dinners, spoke only when directly asked questions, and seemed to flinch whenever I entered a room where she was alone. Our parents noticed the change immediately. Marcus asked if she was sick or having problems at school. Linda wondered if she had broken up with her latest boyfriend, a 23-year-old mechanic named Tyler, who worked at the garage downtown. But Emma insisted she was fine, just tired from staying up too late studying for her own final exams. I was worried sick about her. Whatever had happened that night at the party was clearly traumatic, but she refused to talk about it. I tried approaching her gently, offering to drive her to counseling or to the hospital if she needed medical attention. I suggested she talk to Sarah, thinking maybe she would open up to another woman. Each time, Emma shook her head and begged me to let it go. "I just need time," she kept saying. "Please don't push me to talk about it. I'm handling it the best way I know how." The guilt was eating me alive. As her older brother, I felt responsible for protecting her, but I did not know how to help someone who would not tell me what was wrong. I lost sleep wondering if I should have insisted on calling the police that night, if I should have demanded she explain what happened at the party. But she had asked for my silence, and I had given it. Our house buzzed with excitement about my upcoming graduation, and medical school orientation trip. Marcus had arranged for the whole family to drive to Cleveland so I could tour the campus and meet my future professors. He talked constantly about how proud he was, how this represented everything our family had worked toward. The new Honda Accord sat in our driveway with a big red bow on the windshield, a symbol of their faith in my future. Linda was planning an elaborate graduation party for the weekend before the Cleveland trip. She had hired extra staff from her catering company and ordered flowers from the most expensive florist in Columbus. Invitations had gone out to everyone we knew, from my high school teachers to my father's business associates. It was going to be the celebration of a lifetime. But Emma's strange behavior was casting a shadow over everything. She barely spoke during our family planning meetings, just nodded when asked if she wanted to invite any of her friends to the party. She stopped coming down for breakfast, claiming she was not hungry. She spent most of her time locked in her bedroom with music playing loud enough to discourage conversation. Linda was becoming frantic with worry. I found her crying in the laundry room one afternoon, folding clothes with the desperate precision of someone trying to control an uncontrollable situation. "I don't know what's wrong with her, Randolph," she said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "She won't eat, she won't talk, she barely leaves her room. What if she's sick? What if something terrible happened and she's too scared to tell us?" I wanted to tell her about that night, about finding Emma upset and holding her while she cried. But I had promised to keep it secret, and I was still naive enough to believe that keeping promises mattered more than protecting people from the truth. "Maybe she's just stressed about graduating high school," I suggested. "You know how she gets when she feels pressured about the future. Once all this celebration stuff is over, she'll probably go back to normal." But even as I said it, I knew normal was not coming back. Something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic, and I could feel it like a storm approaching on a clear day. The breaking point came 3 days before my graduation party. I was in my room organizing textbooks to donate to the library when I heard Linda's scream from downstairs. It was not the kind of scream you hear when someone drops a glass or sees a spider. It was the sound of a heart breaking in real time. I ran downstairs to find Linda standing in the doorway of Emma's bedroom, her face white with shock. Emma was sitting on her bed in pajamas, surrounded by crumpled tissues, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. "She told me everything," Linda whispered when she saw me. "Oh my God, Randolph. She told me what you did to her." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there in the hallway trying to process what I was hearing, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. "What I did to her, Mom? What are you talking about? I haven't done anything to Emma except try to help her through whatever happened that night at the party." But Linda was not looking at me with love or trust anymore. She was looking at me like I was a stranger who had invaded her home and threatened her family. Behind her, Emma was crying again. But these tears looked different. These tears looked calculated. That night when she came home upset, Linda said, her voice shaking with rage and disbelief. She told me what really happened. How you took advantage of her when she was vulnerable. How you've been inappropriate with her for months. How she's been too scared and ashamed to tell anyone until now. The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. I reached out to steady myself against the wall, staring at my sister in complete shock. Emma would not meet my eyes, but I could see something in her posture that terrified me. She looked like she was performing rather than remembering. "Emma, tell them the truth." I begged, my voice cracking with desperation. "Tell them what really happened that night. You came home upset about something that happened at a party. I comforted you like I've done 1,000 times before. Nothing inappropriate happened. Nothing wrong happened at all." For just a moment, Emma's mask slipped. She looked directly at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was cold and calculating, and completely devoid of the love I thought we had always shared. Then she buried her face in her hands and sobbed even louder. "He's lying," she whispered through her tears. "He always makes everything sound innocent, but it wasn't innocent. I can't keep pretending everything is okay. I can't keep protecting him when I'm the one who needs protection." Linda wrapped her arms around Emma like she was shielding her from a monster. When she looked at me again, her eyes held nothing but disgust and disappointment. "Get your father," she told me, her voice ice cold. "We're going to settle this right now." As I walked downstairs to find Marcus, I knew with terrible certainty that my life as I knew it was over. But I had no idea how thoroughly Emma had planned my destruction or how much evidence she had already manufactured to support her lies. The golden boy was about to fall, and there would be no one left to catch him. Marcus was in his study reviewing quarterly reports when I knocked on the door with shaking hands. He looked up from his papers with the warm smile he reserved for me, his successful son, who never caused problems or demanded attention at inconvenient moments. "What's going on, son? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Dad, we need to talk. Mom wants you upstairs. It's about Emma, and it's serious." The smile faded from his face as he stood and followed me up the stairs. I could hear Emma's muffled sobs growing louder as we approached her room, where Linda was still holding her like a broken bird that needed protection from the world. When Marcus saw his daughter's tear-stained face and his wife's expression of barely controlled rage, something shifted in his posture. He became the protective father instead of the proud businessman, and I watched 20 years of his love for me drain away in the space of a heartbeat. What happened here? He demanded, his voice carrying the authority he used in boardroom negotiations. Linda explained Emma's accusations in halting sentences, stopping frequently to comfort our sister when her crying became too intense to continue. With each word, Marcus's face grew harder and his eyes colder. By the time Linda finished speaking, he was looking at me like I was a criminal who had violated the sanctity of his home. "Is this true, Randolph?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "No, Dad. None of it is true." Emma came home upset about something that happened at a party. I comforted her because she was crying and scared. That's all that happened. I would never hurt her. I would never hurt anyone. I was pleading now, begging them to remember who I was, to trust the person they had raised and loved for 20 years. But Emma had prepared for this moment more carefully than I could have imagined. "Show them," she whispered to Linda, pulling her phone from under her pillow with trembling hands. Linda took the phone and scrolled through text messages that made her gasp in horror. She showed the screen to Marcus, who read in silence before his face turned red with fury. "These are text messages from Randolph to Emma," Linda announced, her voice shaking, threatening her, telling her to keep quiet about what happened, saying he would hurt her if she told anyone. I stared at the phone in complete disbelief. The messages were there in black and white, sent from my phone number to Emma's, filled with language I would never use and threats I would never make. But I had never sent those texts. I had never even thought the words that appeared on that screen. "I didn't send those messages," I said, desperately. "I don't know how they got there, but I didn't send them. Emma, please tell them the truth. You know I didn't send those messages." Emma looked up at me with eyes full of tears and something that looked almost like pity. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wanted to protect you. I wanted to pretend it never happened. But I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep being afraid in my own house." She reached under her mattress and pulled out a t-shirt I recognized as one of mine, along with a small notebook I had never seen before. "This is my diary," she said, handing the notebook to Linda. "I've been writing down everything that happened, all the times I felt scared or uncomfortable, and this is his shirt. He left it in my room after that night." Linda opened the diary and began reading entries that described months of inappropriate behavior, uncomfortable situations, and escalating fear. The handwriting was Emma's, but the events described were completely fictional. According to the diary, I had been systematically traumatizing my sister for almost a year, building up to the assault she claimed happened that night in April. Marcus read over Linda's shoulder, his breathing becoming heavier with each page. When he looked at me again, there was nothing left of the father who had proudly bought me a car and planned my graduation party. "Get out," he said quietly. "Dad, please listen to me. I can prove this is all lies. Let me take a lie detector test. Let me show you my phone records. Let me do anything to prove I'm telling the truth." I said, "Get out." His voice was louder now, filled with a rage I had never heard before. "Marcus, wait." Linda interrupted. "Maybe we should call the police. Maybe we should make sure he faces consequences for what he's done." "No," Emma said quickly, grabbing her mother's arm. "Please don't call the police. I just want him gone. I just want to feel safe again. I don't want to go through trials and questioning and having to tell strangers what happened. I just want him to leave and never come back." It was the perfect manipulation. By refusing to involve the police, Emma avoided the scrutiny that might have exposed her lies. But her refusal also made her seem more believable to our parents, who interpreted it as trauma rather than calculation. Marcus looked at me with complete disgust and spoke the words that would haunt me for the next 9 years. "You have 24 hours to get your things and get out of this house. You're no longer welcome in this family. Your college fund is frozen. Your car keys are confiscated. Your acceptance to medical school will be withdrawn. If you ever try to contact Emma or come near this house again, I will have you arrested." "What about Sarah?" I asked desperately. "What about Jake? What about everyone who knows me? They'll never believe this." Linda's laugh was bitter and broken. "Sarah already knows. Emma called her while you were downstairs getting your father. She's not your girlfriend anymore. And Jake? Well, Jake has seen the text messages too. Amazing how quickly people's opinions change when they learn the truth about someone." The room was spinning around me. In the space of 30 minutes, I had lost my family, my girlfriend, my best friend, my future career, and my entire identity. Everything I had worked for and believed in was gone, destroyed by lies so elaborate and convincing that even the people who loved me most had no doubt about my guilt. As I stumbled toward the door, Emma called my name softly. I turned back, hoping against hope that she was about to recant her story and save what was left of my life. Instead, she looked directly into my eyes with an expression of cold satisfaction and whispered words that would echo in my nightmares for years to come. "I told you that you weren't the only special one in this family anymore." The mask had slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating mind behind the tears and trauma. She had planned this destruction carefully and completely, and she was proud of her work. But she had whispered the words so quietly that only I could hear them. And by the time I processed what she had said, she was sobbing again, and Linda was comforting her. I left that house with nothing but 2 suitcases and $300 from my part-time job at the clinic. My car keys, my credit cards, my bank account, and my entire future had been taken away based on the word of an 18-year-old girl who had spent months planning the perfect revenge. The golden boy was dead. I just didn't know yet who I would become in his place. Hitchhiking to Denver with everything I owned in 2 beat-up suitcases was the first step in a journey that would take me 9 years to complete. I chose Colorado specifically because it was far enough from Ohio that I could disappear completely, and because I had never been there with my family. I needed a place with no memories, no connections, and no chance of running into anyone who might recognize the person I used to be. The first 2 years were a masterclass in survival and humiliation. I found a studio apartment in a rough neighborhood for $350 a month, sharing the building with drug dealers and minimum wage workers who had their own reasons for avoiding questions about their past. My neighbors assumed I was hiding from the law, and I never bothered to correct that assumption. Construction work was the only job I could find that paid cash, and didn't require extensive background checks. I spent 12-hour days framing houses in suburban developments, my soft pre-med student hands developing calluses and scars that served as daily reminders of how far I had fallen. My co-workers were mostly undocumented immigrants who understood the value of silence and hard work. They taught me basic Spanish and shared their lunch when I couldn't afford to buy my own. Those first winters in Denver nearly broke me. I lived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, wore the same 3 shirts until they fell apart, and walked everywhere to save money on bus fare. My studio apartment had no heat beyond a space heater that ran up the electric bill, so I slept wearing every piece of clothing I owned and still woke up shivering. But something unexpected happened during those brutal early months. The physical exhaustion of construction work left me too tired to think about my destroyed past. The simple goal of earning enough money to eat and pay rent gave structure to days that might otherwise have been consumed by rage and self-pity. I discovered that I was stronger than I had ever known, both physically and mentally. By the end of my second year in Denver, I had saved enough money to enroll part-time at Community College of Denver. I chose criminal justice as my major, driven by a burning need to understand how the justice system worked and why innocent people could be condemned so easily. I wanted to learn about evidence and investigations and the psychology of false accusations. Balancing construction work with night classes was exhausting, but I approached it with the same methodical determination I had once applied to pre-med studies. I earned perfect grades because I literally had nothing else to live for except proving to myself that I was still capable of academic achievement. My professors noticed my dedication and began encouraging me to transfer to a 4-year university. During my 3rd year in Denver, I made the life-changing decision to pursue law school instead of trying to rebuild my path toward medicine. I had lost faith in the healing profession, but I had gained a passionate interest in protecting the innocent and exposing the guilty. If Emma had taught me anything, it was that the truth could be buried under lies so convincing that even loving parents would abandon their own child without investigation. I transferred to University of Colorado, Denver on a partial scholarship earned through my community college grades. The transition from construction worker to university student was jarring, but I had learned to adapt to dramatic changes in circumstances. I kept my head down, studied relentlessly, and avoided forming close friendships that might lead to personal questions about my background. My undergraduate years were marked by academic excellence and social isolation. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in criminal justice and a minor in psychology, but I attended the ceremony alone. While my classmates celebrated with families and friends, I sat in the back row, wearing a borrowed cap and gown, thinking about the graduation party my parents had planned for me years earlier. Law school at University of Denver opened doors I had never expected to walk through. I specialized in criminal defense and family law, particularly cases involving false accusations and family trauma. My professors were impressed by my intuitive understanding of how families could destroy themselves through misplaced trust and poor communication. They had no idea my expertise came from personal experience rather than academic study. During my second year of law school, I began working part-time at a legal aid clinic that provided free representation to people who couldn't afford attorneys. Many of our clients were men who had been accused of domestic violence or child abuse without clear evidence. Helping them navigate the legal system gave me a sense of purpose I had not felt since leaving medical school behind. I graduated from law school with highest honors and immediately accepted a position at a small criminal defense firm specializing in wrongful accusations. My starting salary was modest, but it felt like a fortune compared to my construction wages. For the first time since leaving Ohio, I could afford to live in a decent apartment and eat regular meals without counting every dollar. The partners at my firm recognized my talent for investigation and client relations. Within 3 years, I had built a reputation for taking on difficult cases and achieving results that other attorneys considered impossible. My clients were people the system had failed, Fathers accused of molesting their children by vindictive ex-wives. Teachers destroyed by false allegations from troubled students. Employees terminated based on rumors and innuendo rather than facts. Each case I won felt like a small victory against the forces that had destroyed my own life. I could not save myself from Emma's lies, but I could prevent other innocent people from suffering the same fate. My success rate attracted attention from larger firms, but I chose to start my own practice instead. Patterson and Associates opened its doors on the 6th anniversary of my exile from Ohio. The name was my private joke, a tribute to the best friend who had abandoned me based on fabricated text messages. Jake Patterson had believed Emma's lies without question, but I chose to honor our former friendship anyway because holding grudges required emotional energy I needed for other purposes. My law practice grew quickly through word of mouth and referrals from satisfied clients. I hired 2 associate attorneys and a private investigator named Carlos Rodriguez, a former police detective who understood how investigations could be manipulated by people with hidden agendas. Carlos became my closest friend in Denver, though I never told him the real reason I had moved to Colorado. By my 7th year in Denver, I was financially successful enough to buy a house in a quiet neighborhood and drive a reliable car. I had built a professional reputation that opened doors throughout the legal community. Judge Helen Morrison, who had presided over several of my cases, became an informal mentor who guided my career toward increasingly high-profile clients. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Amanda Foster during my 8th year in exile, not because I was ready to process my family trauma, but because opposing attorneys had begun using my emotional investment in false accusation cases against me in court. Dr. Foster helped me maintain professional objectivity while channeling my personal experience into effective advocacy for my clients. My 9th year in Denver brought the kind of success I had once imagined achieving as a doctor. My firm was handling cases in multiple states, and I was invited to speak at legal conferences about defending the falsely accused. I published articles in law journals and consulted on high-profile cases that made national news. But success could not fill the hole where my family used to be. I had no contact with anyone from my past, had changed my last name legally to avoid unwanted discovery, and moved apartments frequently to prevent old connections from tracking me down. I had built a fortress around my new identity that kept me safe, but also kept me isolated. On my 29th birthday, I was sitting in my law office reviewing case files when my assistant knocked on the door with a certified letter from a law firm in Columbus, Ohio. My hands shook as I signed for the delivery, knowing that only devastating news would travel so far to find me. The letter contained a legal document that changed everything I thought I knew about truth, justice, and family loyalty. According to the private investigator's report, enclosed with the letter, my sister Emma had been arrested for fraud and extortion against 3 different families using false accusation schemes identical to the one she had used against me 9 years earlier. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, witness statements, and Emma's own handwritten diary detailing her plans to destroy innocent men for financial gain. The investigator had uncovered a pattern of behavior going back years, including irrefutable proof that she had fabricated every detail of her accusation against me. For the first time in 9 years, someone with authority and credentials was telling me that I had been telling the truth all along. But the vindication came too late to save the family that had abandoned me, and too late to reclaim the medical career that had been stolen from me. I sat in my office until well past midnight reading and rereading the evidence that cleared my name while condemning my sister. The golden boy was dead, but the man who had risen from his ashes was stronger, wiser, and more capable than the naive 20-year-old had ever been. Now I had to decide what to do with the truth that had finally set me free. The investigative report spread across my desk like a roadmap to 9 years of buried truth. Private investigator Michael Chen had compiled evidence so thorough and devastating that it read like a prosecutor's closing argument in a criminal trial. Every page revealed another layer of Emma's systematic deception, not just against me, but against multiple families across Ohio and Pennsylvania. Emma's arrest had triggered an investigation that uncovered what law enforcement was calling a sophisticated con game targeting wealthy families with teenage or young adult sons. Her method was consistent and calculated: infiltrate the family's social circle, create situations where she appeared vulnerable and sympathetic, then manufacture evidence of inappropriate behavior when she needed money or attention. The most damning evidence was Emma's real diary, discovered in a safety deposit box she had rented under a false name. Unlike the fabricated journal she had shown our parents, this diary contained her authentic thoughts and plans. The entries about me were particularly chilling in their cold calculation. Randolph thinks he's so perfect with his medical school acceptance and his perfect grades. She had written 6 months before destroying my life. Mom and Dad worship him like he's their golden god while I get lectured about every little mistake. His college fund is twice as big as mine. He gets the car and the praise and the future, while I get the disappointment and the criticism. Time to show them their precious son isn't as perfect as they think. Subsequent entries detailed her plan with horrifying precision. She had researched false accusation cases, studied how to create believable evidence, and practiced her victim persona in front of her bedroom mirror. The night she came home claiming to be traumatized, she had actually been at a planning meeting with Tyler, her boyfriend, who had helped her tear her clothes and smudge her makeup to create the appearance of an assault. Tyler had confessed to his role in the scheme after being arrested as an accomplice. According to his statement, Emma had promised him $5,000 from the money she planned to extort from our parents for her healing and therapy. She had told him that destroying me was the only way to secure her financial future and force our parents to transfer their attention and resources to their surviving child. The fake text messages had been created using Tyler's phone and a simple app that spoofed sender numbers. The diary entries had been backwritten over several weeks using different pens and inks to create the appearance of months of documentation. Even the t-shirt she claimed I had left in her room had been taken from my laundry basket and planted as evidence. But Emma's crimes against me were only the beginning of her career as a professional victim. The investigation revealed similar schemes against the Daniels family in Cincinnati, the Thompson family in Pittsburgh, and the Wilson family in Cleveland. In each case, Emma had infiltrated the family through social connections, targeted the most successful son, and demanded money in exchange for not filing formal charges. The Daniels had paid her $15,000 after she accused their 19-year-old son of assault at a house party. The Thompsons had given her $22,000 to relocate and start fresh after she claimed their 21-year-old son had stalked and threatened her. The Wilsons had paid her $35,000 for therapy and trauma counseling after she accused their 17-year-old son of inappropriate touching during a family gathering. Michael Chen's investigation had been triggered when the Wilsons hired him to verify Emma's story before making their final payment. Unlike my parents, they had demanded proof before opening their checkbook. Chen's background check had revealed inconsistencies in Emma's identity and timeline that led to deeper investigation and eventual discovery of her entire operation. The evidence package included bank records showing deposits of extortion money testimony from accomplices who had helped Emma create false evidence, and digital forensics proving that photographs and text messages had been fabricated. Most devastating of all were recordings of phone conversations where Emma bragged about her ability to destroy rich boys who think they're better than everyone else. But the most shocking revelation came in the final pages of the report. My parents had known the truth for 6 months before the letter reached me. They had hired Michael Chen themselves, after Emma was arrested desperately searching for evidence that their daughter was innocent of the charges against her. Instead, they had discovered that she was guilty of far more than they had ever imagined. Linda and Marcus had spent months processing the reality that they had destroyed their innocent son based on the lies of their guilty daughter. They had tried multiple times to locate me, hiring private investigators and searching social media, but my careful efforts to hide my identity had been successful. They knew I was alive and practicing law in Denver, but they had no idea how to contact me or whether I would want to hear from them. The investigation revealed another devastating truth about my former relationships. Sarah Collins had tried to find me 3 years earlier after Emma drunkenly confessed her lies at a Columbus bar. Sarah had spent months searching for ways to contact me, but she had been looking for Randolph Harrison instead of Randolph Mitchell. My legal name change had made me invisible to her efforts. Jake Patterson's story was the most surprising of all. My former best friend had become a police detective in Columbus, and he had never stopped believing something was wrong about Emma's accusations against me. When he heard about her arrest through law enforcement channels, Jake had used his connections to launch an unofficial investigation that ultimately contributed to Chen's evidence file. Jake had been trying to find me for 2 years, carrying guilt about his failure to support me when I needed him most. He had reviewed the original text messages with fresh eyes and realized they contained language patterns that did not match my communication style. His police training had taught him to recognize fabricated evidence, and he had come to believe that Emma had manipulated him as thoroughly as she had manipulated our parents. The evidence package concluded with a personal letter from Jake explaining his investigation and his desperate desire to make amends for his betrayal. He included his phone number and email address, along with a promise to testify about Emma's pattern of deception if I ever decided to pursue legal action against her. Reading that letter broke something inside me that had been carefully controlled for 9 years. Jake had been my closest friend, the person I trusted most outside my family. His betrayal had hurt almost as much as my parents' abandonment. Learning that he had fought to clear my name and expose Emma's lies meant more to me than vindication from strangers ever could. But the most important revelation was that I finally had the power to ensure Emma could never destroy another innocent family. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her pattern of behavior provided a clear path toward federal fraud and extortion charges that would result in serious prison time. For the first time since leaving Ohio, I had choices to make about my future, instead of simply surviving from one day to the next. I could pursue revenge against Emma and my parents. I could attempt to rebuild relationships with people who had abandoned me, or I could use the truth to prevent Emma from harming anyone else while maintaining the distance that had allowed me to heal. The scared 20-year-old who had fled Ohio with 2 suitcases would have chosen revenge without hesitation. But the 29-year-old attorney, who had built a successful practice defending the innocent, understood that justice was more important than vengeance, and that some relationships could never be rebuilt, no matter how much truth emerged. I had work to do, but this time I would be fighting from a position of strength instead of desperation. The evidence folder remained open on my desk for 3 days, while I wrestled with emotions I had buried so deeply I barely recognized them anymore. Vindication felt different than I had imagined during all those nights when I fantasized about the truth finally emerging. Instead of triumph, I felt a deep sadness for the naive young man I had been, and the family relationships that could never be restored. My first instinct was to ignore everything and continue the successful life I had built in Denver. Why reopen wounds that had finally stopped bleeding? Why risk the emotional devastation of confronting people who had betrayed me so completely? The safe choice was to let the past stay buried, while I focused on the future I had created through 9 years of relentless work. But the evidence package included details about Emma's current victims that made isolation impossible. The Wilson family's 17-year-old son had attempted suicide after Emma's accusations destroyed his relationships and college prospects. The Thompson family's marriage had ended in divorce because the father believed their son's guilt while the mother maintained his innocence. Emma's lies had created a trail of devastation that extended far beyond my personal suffering. I called Carlos Rodriguez at 6 in the morning on the fourth day, asking him to meet me at the office for an emergency consultation. Carlos had become more than my private investigator over the years. He was the closest thing to a brother I had allowed myself since losing Jake's friendship. His background in police work and his understanding of criminal behavior made him the perfect person to help me navigate the complex legal and personal decisions ahead. Carlos arrived with coffee and bagels, taking one look at my face and settling in for a long conversation. I handed him the evidence folder without explanation, watching his expression change from curiosity to shock to anger as he read through Emma's systematic destruction of multiple families. "This is your sister," he said finally, his voice carrying the flat tone he used when discussing particularly heinous crimes. "This is why you moved to Denver. This is why you became a defense attorney. This is why you never talk about your family." I nodded, unable to trust my voice to remain steady. Carlos had never pushed me for personal details during our friendship, respecting the privacy I had built around my past. But his investigative skills had probably allowed him to piece together more of my story than I realized. "What do you want to do about it?" he asked, closing the folder and looking directly into my eyes. "I want to make sure she never does this to another family," I said immediately. "But I don't want revenge. I want justice." Carlos smiled grimly, recognizing the difference between those two concepts. Revenge would have meant using my resources and connections to destroy Emma personally, to make her suffer the way she had made me suffer. Justice meant using the legal system to hold her accountable while protecting future victims from her manipulation. We spent the next 6 hours developing a comprehensive strategy that balanced my personal needs with the greater good. The evidence against Emma was strong enough to support federal charges for wire fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Her use of electronic communications to coordinate her schemes across state lines brought the case under federal jurisdiction, where penalties would be more severe than state court. My role would be crucial but carefully limited. I would provide testimony about Emma's pattern of behavior and the long-term impact of her lies, but I would not seek personal vengeance or financial compensation. The goal was to ensure she received appropriate punishment while establishing legal precedent for prosecuting similar cases in the future. Carlos reached out to contacts in federal law enforcement, while I contacted Jake Patterson for the first time in 9 years. The phone call was awkward and emotional, filled with apologies and explanations that could never fully repair the damage that had been done. But Jake's information about Emma's behavior patterns and his connections in Ohio law enforcement would be essential for building the strongest possible case. Jake had evidence I never could have obtained alone. As a police detective, he had access to criminal databases and investigative resources that revealed additional victims Emma might have targeted. His review of her social media accounts and financial records showed a pattern of seeking out wealthy families with vulnerable sons, systematically identifying and exploiting their weaknesses. The federal investigation moved quickly once we provided our evidence. Emma was already in custody on the original fraud charges, but the additional evidence supported a much broader indictment that could result in decades in prison. The prosecutor assigned to the case was Patricia Williams, a career federal attorney who specialized in complex fraud schemes. Patricia understood the emotional complexity of my situation and worked carefully to protect my privacy while building the strongest possible case. My testimony would be given behind closed doors to avoid media attention, and my current identity would be sealed in court records to prevent unwanted publicity for my law practice. The most difficult decision involved my parents. The investigation had revealed their desperate attempts to find me and make amends for their catastrophic mistake. They had sold the family business and their house, using the money to create a charitable foundation that provided legal assistance to young men who had been falsely accused of crimes against family members. Linda called my office repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from heartbroken apologies to desperate pleas for just one conversation. Marcus, who had never apologized to anyone in his life, sent handwritten letters taking full responsibility for believing Emma without investigation and promising to do anything necessary to earn my forgiveness. I listened to their messages and read their letters without responding, struggling to process feelings I had buried for nearly a decade. The logical part of my mind understood that they had been deceived as thoroughly as everyone else. Emma's manipulation had been sophisticated and believable, designed to exploit their natural desire to protect their daughter. But the emotional damage could not be erased by explanations or apologies. They had abandoned their son based on accusations they never verified, cutting off all contact and destroying my future without allowing me to defend myself. Their current remorse felt sincere, but it could not restore the years we had lost, or the trust that had been shattered. After weeks of internal struggle, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I would meet with my parents once, not for emotional reconciliation, but to establish clear boundaries for our future relationship. They deserved to know that I had survived and succeeded. But they also needed to understand that forgiveness did not mean restoration. The meeting took place in my law office on a rainy Thursday afternoon in November. Linda and Marcus looked older and smaller than I remembered, worn down by years of guilt and regret. But I felt nothing but mild sadness when I saw them, as if they were strangers who reminded me of people I used to know. We spoke for 2 hours about facts and logistics rather than emotions and apologies. I explained my career and my current life without providing personal details. They shared their efforts to locate me and their work with the charitable foundation without asking for credit or recognition. By the end of our conversation, we had established a distant but civil relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. Emma's federal trial lasted 3 weeks and resulted in conviction on all counts. She was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to her victims. More importantly, the case established legal precedent for prosecuting similar schemes and provided law enforcement with tools for identifying and investigating false accusation fraud. My testimony had focused on the long-term impact of false accusations rather than seeking sympathy or revenge. I described the academic and career opportunities that had been lost, the relationships that had been destroyed, and the years of rebuilding required to create a new identity. But I also emphasized that survival and success were possible, that victims of false accusations could recover and thrive with proper support and determination. The media coverage of Emma's case brought attention to the broader issue of false accusations and their impact on families. I was interviewed by several legal journals about defending the innocent and protecting the rights of the accused. My law practice expanded to include consultation on false accusation cases nationwide, turning my personal trauma into professional expertise that could help others avoid similar suffering. But the most important outcome of the trial was personal rather than professional. I had proven to myself that truth could ultimately triumph over lies, that justice could be achieved through patient work and careful preparation. The scared 20-year-old who had fled Ohio in disgrace had become a confident 29-year-old attorney who could face his past without shame or fear. The golden boy was gone forever, but the man who had replaced him was stronger, wiser, and more valuable to the world than his younger self had ever been. 1 year after Emma's conviction, I stood before a packed courtroom in Denver, addressing a group of families who had been torn apart by false accusations and systematic manipulation. The support group I had helped establish met monthly, bringing together parents who had lost children to lies, siblings who had been turned against each other by deception, and young people whose futures had been stolen by malicious fabrications. Emma's case had become a landmark in family fraud prosecution, cited in law journals and legal textbooks as an example of how false accusations could be weaponized for financial gain and personal revenge. The investigation had ultimately uncovered 12 separate families she had targeted over 5 years, with total financial damages exceeding $300,000. More importantly, it had revealed the psychological patterns that made her scheme so effective and devastating. The federal prison system was providing Emma with the mental health treatment she should have received years earlier. Her psychological evaluation had revealed a complex personality disorder characterized by narcissistic tendencies, profound jealousy, and an inability to accept responsibility for her actions. The doctors treating her believed she could eventually develop empathy and remorse, but recovery would require years of intensive therapy and genuine commitment to change. I felt no satisfaction in my sister's imprisonment, only a deep sadness for the family relationships that could never be restored, and the innocent people who had been harmed by her actions. Emma's victims included not just the families she had defrauded, but our own parents who would carry the guilt of their betrayal for the rest of their lives. Recovery from her manipulation would be a lifelong process for everyone she had touched. My relationship with Linda and Marcus had evolved into something distant but respectful, more like acquaintances with shared history than family members with emotional bonds. They attended my speaking engagements, sometimes sitting in the back row, and listening to my presentations about rebuilding after betrayal. We exchanged holiday cards and brief emails about significant life events, but we would never again be the close family we had been before Emma's lies destroyed our trust. The Harrison Family Foundation, created from the sale of their business and house, had provided legal assistance to over 200 families dealing with false accusation cases. Linda and Marcus had dedicated their remaining years to preventing other families from suffering the way ours had, turning their guilt into productive action that honored my experience without attempting to erase their mistakes. Jake Patterson had become my law partner and closest friend, proving that some relationships could be rebuilt stronger after being tested by crisis and truth. His police background and investigative skills complemented my legal expertise perfectly, and our firm had developed a national reputation for defending the innocent against false accusations. We handled cases ranging from custody disputes based on fabricated abuse claims to criminal prosecutions built on manufactured evidence. The personal cost of Emma's betrayal had been enormous, but it had also led to professional success and personal growth I never could have achieved as the naive pre-med student I had been at 20. My experience with false accusations had given me unique insight into the psychology of deception and the legal strategies needed to expose lies. My law practice helped hundreds of innocent people avoid the devastation I had endured, turning my trauma into a tool for protecting others. Dr. Amanda Foster had become more than my therapist during the years following Emma's trial. After our professional relationship ended appropriately, we had developed a personal friendship that gradually deepened into love and marriage. Amanda understood trauma and recovery in ways that allowed her to support my healing without trying to fix or change me. She had her own history of rebuilding after betrayal, having survived an abusive marriage before becoming a therapist, specializing in family trauma. Our wedding was small and simple, attended by the friends and colleagues who had become our chosen family in Denver. Linda and Marcus were invited, but did not attend, respecting our decision to keep our new beginning separate from our complicated past. Sarah Collins sent a wedding gift and a letter expressing her happiness for my success and her regret for not fighting harder to support me when Emma's lies were first revealed. The most meaningful moment of our wedding came when Carlos Rodriguez, my best man, delivered a toast that captured the essence of my journey from destruction to redemption. He spoke about the difference between the family you are born into and the family you choose, about the courage required to rebuild after betrayal, and about the strength that comes from helping others avoid the suffering you have endured. My law office displayed photos that told the story of my chosen family, Carlos, and his wife, Maria Jake, and his partner, David Amanda, and her teenage daughter from her first marriage, Judge Helen Morrison, and her husband, and dozens of clients whose lives had been saved by our work. These were the people who had supported my recovery, celebrated my victories, and created the foundation for my new life. But the most important photo sat on my desk in a simple silver frame, a picture of me addressing a group of teenage boys whose families had been targeted by false accusations, similar to Emma's. These young men had lost friends' educational opportunities and family relationships to lies designed to destroy their futures. My job was to help them understand that survival was possible, that healing could happen, and that their lives could become more meaningful because of their suffering rather than in spite of it. Speaking to these groups had become the most rewarding part of my work, more important than winning high-profile cases or earning recognition from legal organizations. These young people needed to hear from someone who had walked their path and emerged stronger on the other side. They needed to know that false accusations could not define them, that their worth was not determined by other people's lies, and that their futures were still bright despite the darkness they were currently experiencing. The greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong about you, I told the support group that evening. It's in proving to yourself that you can rebuild a life based on truth, integrity, and genuine connections. My sister took 9 years from me, but she couldn't take who I really am. In trying to destroy me, she forced me to discover a strength I never knew I had. Sometimes the people who hurt us most teach us the most about ourselves. The audience listened intently, seeing in my story a roadmap for their own recovery. Some were parents struggling with guilt for believing lies about their children. Others were young people whose reputations had been destroyed by systematic manipulation. All of them needed hope that healing was possible and that their lives could have meaning beyond their suffering. I concluded my presentation with the life lesson that had taken me years to understand. True justice isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about breaking the cycle of hurt and building something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. Emma's lies forced me to leave behind a life I thought I wanted and discover a life I actually needed. I became a better man, a more effective advocate, and a more compassionate human being because of what she put me through. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it means she didn't win in the end. Truth always wins in the end, even when it takes longer than we want. After the meeting, I returned to my office to finish preparing for a case involving a college student falsely accused of sexual assault by a classmate seeking attention and sympathy. The evidence was similar to what Emma had manufactured against me: fabricated text messages, planted physical evidence, and carefully coached testimony designed to exploit assumptions about victim credibility. But this young man would not face his accusations alone the way I had. He had an experienced legal team, a support network that understood false accusations, and access to investigative resources that could expose lies before they destroyed his life. My experience had taught me how to protect other innocent people from suffering the way my family and I had suffered. The phone on my desk displayed 17 missed calls from families seeking help with false accusation cases. Each call represented someone whose life had been turned upside down by lies, whose future hung in the balance while they waited for truth to emerge. My calendar was booked solid for the next 6 months with clients who needed the expertise I had gained through personal trauma and professional dedication. As I prepared to leave the office that night, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from destruction to redemption. The scared 20-year-old who had fled Ohio with 2 suitcases and $300 could never have imagined the life I had built in Denver. He had seen only loss and betrayal, devastation, and hopelessness. But that young man's suffering had been transformed into strength. His isolation had become independence, and his trauma had become wisdom. Emma's attempt to destroy me had ultimately forced me to become a better version of myself than I ever would have been without her betrayal. The golden boy she had hated was gone, replaced by someone more valuable to the world and more satisfied with his life. The photo on my desk showed the truth about success and family. Genuine relationships are built on choice, rather than obligation, on respect rather than expectation, and on shared values rather than shared genetics. The people who had supported my recovery, celebrated my achievements, and helped me build a meaningful career were more truly my family than the people who had abandoned me, based on lies. Emma was serving her sentence in federal prison, hopefully learning to take responsibility for her actions and develop genuine empathy for her victims. Linda and Marcus were living with the consequences of their failure to investigate before condemning, working to prevent other families from making their mistakes. Sarah had found happiness with someone who had never doubted her character. Jake had become the brother I had always needed, loyal and supportive and committed to truth over convenience. And I had found something more valuable than the medical career I had lost or the family relationships that had been destroyed. I had discovered that meaning comes from helping others, that strength grows from surviving adversity, and that the best life is one built on principles rather than promises from other people. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone's betrayal forced you to become stronger than you ever thought possible? Have you found that your greatest challenges sometimes lead to your most meaningful victories? I'd love to hear your thoughts about overcoming betrayal and rebuilding after loss in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my story and allowing me to share the lessons I've learned about family truth and the power of choosing your own path forward. Remember that your worth is not determined by other people's lies, and your future is not limited by their betrayal. Sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up forcing us to discover who we're truly meant to be. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in unexpected places. Share it with someone who might need to hear that survival and success are possible even after devastating betrayal. Your support helps me continue sharing these important messages about resilience, justice, and the courage required to rebuild after loss. Until next time, remember that truth always wins in the end, even when the journey is longer and harder than we expect. Keep fighting for what's right. Keep believing in your own worth, and keep building the life you deserve based on the person you choose to be.